You're disgusting trash. That's not just an insult. It's the opening shot in one of the most explosive hearings America has ever witnessed. In a room where the truth is supposed to reign, venom dripped from every word. On one side, Donald Trump, the 47th president, a man backed by 74 million votes but scarred by countless scandals, accusations, and investigations. On the other, Jasmine Crockett, the fiery warrior for justice, unafraid to confront power head-on, her voice echoing the anger of generations silenced by racism, corruption, and abuse. This wasn't politics as usual. It was war in words. Every insult a dagger, every fact a bullet. And before the first 5 minutes were over, the entire chamber was on fire. Donald Trump leaned back in his chair, lips curling into that half-smirk, half-snarl that millions had seen on television. His voice sliced through the murmurs like a rusty blade, low and mocking, meant not just to wound, but to humiliate. "You're nothing but a political clown," he sneered, spitting the words as if they were poison. "A cheap act for cheap applause." The words landed with a thud heavy enough to make the room shift. A few gasps echoed from the rows of reporters scribbling furiously, while others leaned forward, hungry to witness blood drawn this early. But Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. She sat upright, her posture sharp as a blade, eyes fixed on Trump with the kind of unflinching stare that said she'd been waiting her whole life for this moment. When she spoke, her voice was calm, almost icy, each syllable cutting cleaner than a scalpel. "Funny," she said, tilting her head ever so slightly, "coming from a man who's been nothing but a puppet dangling on the strings of dark power." The chamber erupted. Gasps turned into whispers, whispers into stunned murmurs. Every camera flash felt like a lightning strike. The word puppet hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Trump's face twitched, his smirk faltering for just a flicker of a second, replaced by the sharp flash of anger. This was no longer a hearing. It was a gladiator pit. The audience, senators, aides, journalists, and staffers, felt it instantly. The hearing room's polished wood and sterile lights melted away in their minds, replaced by the roaring energy of an arena where two warriors had just stepped into the ring. Trump leaned forward, his fingers drumming against the table like distant war drums. His voice rose, louder now, feeding on fury. "You dare talk to me about power?" he growled. "I am power. I built it. I own it. You're just here because your little mob likes your tantrums." Jasmine's lips curved into a slow, deliberate smile, the kind that isn't amusement, but defiance sharpened into steel. "You don't own power," she shot back, her voice ringing through the chamber like a bell of judgment. "You rent it, and your lease is about to expire." The crowd lost control. Reporters clattered on their keyboards, aides whispered frantically, and a handful of gasps turned into applause before they were quickly silenced by the gavel banging. "Order!" the chairman barked, his voice nearly drowned by the rising storm. "Order in this chamber!" But no one heard him. The energy was too raw, too electric, to be contained by wood, gavel, or decorum. This wasn't a hearing anymore. It was theater, it was war, it was history being written in bloodless violence, but violence all the same. Jasmine leaned closer, refusing to look away, her voice quieter now but searing with heat. "You've fooled millions," she said, "but you can't fool justice, and justice is staring right at you." Trump barked a laugh, harsh and ugly, like a weapon in itself. "Justice? Please. Your justice? You're a joke. You think you scare me? You're disgusting trash." The chamber froze. The insult had returned full circle, sharper, more brutal. His voice carried the weight of contempt, amplified by years of division, a lifetime of enemies crushed beneath bravado. But Jasmine didn't flinch. She inhaled slowly, like a boxer readying for the next round, then rose to her feet. Her voice thundered now, louder than his, louder than the gavel, louder than the noise swelling around them. "Call me trash all you want," she declared, her hands slamming against the table with a crack that echoed like a gunshot. "But trash doesn't topple nations. Trash doesn't silence corruption. And trash doesn't stand here, unafraid, looking you in the eye while you hide behind lies." For a moment, the chamber was utterly still. Even Trump was silent, his jaw tightening as if his own words had just ricocheted back at him. The tension was unbearable. It pressed down on the room like a storm cloud, thick and suffocating, until every breath felt stolen. Then slowly, the murmurs began again. Murmurs of awe, disbelief, exhilaration. The battle lines had been drawn. This was not going to be polite. This was not going to be measured. This was going to be a war fought with words so sharp they could draw blood, and everyone in that room knew it. Jasmine Crockett was no longer just a congresswoman. She was a warrior, standing her ground against a titan of politics, her every word a blade aimed at the heart of corruption. Donald Trump was no longer just a president. He was the villain in a story unfolding live. A man who thrived on chaos but now faced someone who could match his fire blow for blow. The hearing chamber had transformed. No longer a room of lawmakers and record keepers, it was an arena, the air charged like lightning, the floor trembling under the weight of history. And with every heartbeat, every glare, every word, the war between Jasmine Crockett and Donald Trump had only just begun. Because moments like this aren't just politics. They are battles that define an era. And here at Harrison Stories, we bring those battles to life. Subscribe now so you never miss the next strike in this fight for justice. The chamber was still trembling from the clash when Jasmine Crockett made her move. Her hands didn't shake, her voice didn't crack. She carried the calm of someone who knew her weapon was sharper than any insult Trump could throw. From a slim folder marked with red tabs, she slid a sheet across the table, letting it land with a slap that echoed louder than the gavel itself. "Here it is," she said, her eyes locked on Trump. "Undeniable proof. Your financial records, hidden payments, shadow accounts, money funneled through shell corporations like veins carrying poison." Gas cracked through the chamber like lightning splitting the sky. Reporters bent forward, their pens scratching as fast as their hearts were pounding. Trump's face flushed red, the smirk gone, the mask cracking. His hand slammed down on the table, rattling glasses of water and scattering papers. "Lies!" he roared, his voice booming so hard the microphone crackled. "You're a liar, a disgrace to this chamber. Nothing but a malicious fraud spreading filth." The gavel pounded again. "Order! Order!" the chairman shouted, but it was useless. Because in that instant, the room belonged not to rules or decorum, but to rage. Jasmine leaned forward, undeterred, her voice slicing through his thunder like a blade through armor. "Fraud?" she shot back. "Fraud is hiding millions from the American people. Fraud is pretending to serve the country while serving your own pockets. Fraud is thinking you're untouchable when the evidence is right here, in black and white." Trump cut across her, shouting over every word, his fists clenching as if he wanted to crush the paper itself. "You don't know a damn thing. You're inventing numbers. Fake, all fake. I've been audited more times than I can count, and I'm still here. You think you can take me down? You're pathetic trash." His words were venom, spit across the chamber, but Jasmine didn't recoil. She slammed her own hand against the table, the crack as sharp as a gunshot. "You can scream all you want," she fired back, "but screaming won't erase the truth. This isn't my invention. It's your signature, your company's, your greed, written in ink." The crowd erupted, some in gasps, others in murmurs, a few in outright cheers before being hushed by furious staffers. The tension was unbearable, the air so thick it felt like breathing smoke. Two voices clashed like swords, cutting over and through each other. Trump's rage-filled roars, Jasmine's razor-sharp rebuttals, neither yielding, neither retreating, each word colliding in midair, each insult a bomb exploding across the room. "You're a disgrace," Trump shouted. "You're corrupt," Jasmine shot back. "You're lying trash. You're the puppet of greed." The hearing chamber had become a battlefield of sound. The walls seemed to shake, the fluorescent lights buzzing as though even the building itself couldn't handle the fury inside. The chairman's gavel thundered, but it was drowned out, a toy hammer against a hurricane. Never in modern memory had the American people witnessed this. A sitting president, the 47th in office, cornered and accused in real time, forced to defend his empire with nothing but rage and denial. And across from him, Jasmine Crockett, unflinching, unbowed, refusing to let the fire consume her. Every eye in the chamber was locked on them. Every camera lens zoomed in, desperate to capture the sweat on Trump's brow, the fire in Jasmine's stare. The clash wasn't just political, it was personal, primal, raw. Trump pounding the table so hard his glass tipped over, splashing water across his papers. Jasmine rising to her feet, her finger stabbing the air like an arrow aimed straight at his chest. "This is bigger than you," she thundered. "This is about every family cheated, every worker robbed, every voice silenced while you lined your pockets with gold. You call me a liar? Fine. But tell America. Tell them why your accounts in the Cayman Islands hide millions you never reported." The room erupted. For a split second, even Trump was silent, his jaw slack, eyes darting as if the air had been punched from his lungs. Then he snapped, his face twisting, voice cracking with fury. "Shut up!" he bellowed, the sound shaking the microphones. "Shut your mouth, you hateful witch. You don't know what you're talking about. You're making this up because you want your little spotlight. You're nothing but a fraud." Jasmine didn't move, didn't blink, didn't even flinch. Instead, she smiled. A slow, cutting smile that told everyone in that room, everyone watching on live feed across the nation, that this battle was only beginning. And in that silence, in that razor's edge of tension, where Trump's roar hung heavy in the air and Jasmine's smile gleamed like a blade in the dark, the chamber felt history tilt on its axis. For the first time, the unshakable president looked shaken. And for the first time, the nation saw Jasmine Crockett not just as a congresswoman, but as the warrior who had dared to pierce the heart of power. She wasn't done, not even close. With deliberate calm, Jasmine reached for another folder, thicker this time, the edges bristling with sticky notes. She laid it on the table, the soft thud carrying a weight that silenced the whispers still swirling around the chamber. "These aren't just numbers anymore," she declared, her voice steady, her tone sharpened with precision. "These are names. Names of billionaires, oil magnates, foreign tycoons, all tied directly to your companies. Money laundering disguised as business deals. Donations masked as contracts. A web of power built not on service to the American people, but on secret favors to the highest bidder." The silence was deafening. Every ear strained, every eye widened. The cameras zoomed in on her hands as she flipped open the folder and held up a document with highlighted lines and signatures. Trump's face turned crimson, his jaw clenched so tight it seemed his teeth might shatter. Then, like a volcano finally erupting, he exploded. "You pathetic loser," he thundered, jabbing a finger across the table. "You're nothing but a bitter failure trying to tear down a man who's accomplished more than you ever will in your miserable life." The words cracked like gunfire, and for a moment, the chamber seemed to sway under the sheer force of his fury. But Jasmine did not retreat. She leaned forward, one hand pressing the page flat against the table, the other pointing squarely at him. Her eyes burned, not with rage, but with the clarity of conviction. "You can call me a loser all you want," she shot back, her voice rising above his. "But the real failure is selling your country for profit. The real disgrace is shaking hands with oligarchs while American families struggle to put food on the table. And the real cowardice is hiding behind your insults when the truth is staring you in the face." The chamber shook again, not from shouting this time, but from the ripple of murmurs, the collective realization that something historic was happening before their eyes. Trump slammed his fist against the table. Papers flew. Aides flinched. "You don't understand business," he snarled, his voice cracking with fury. "You think every deal is corruption. You think every contract is dirty. Let me tell you something. When I met with Petrova in Moscow," and then he stopped. Too late. The name had already left his lips, the slip already made. The room gasped as one. Reporters' pens scratched frantically, some practically tearing through their notepads. Camera flashes went off like a barrage of gunfire. Jasmine's eyes widened for just a heartbeat, but then narrowed into a predator's focus. She had smelled blood. "Petrova," she repeated slowly, savoring the word as if it were the taste of victory. "So you admit to meeting her? The same Petrova whose fortune is tied to sanctioned oil empires?" The same Petrova whose money slipped quietly into your campaign coffers through shadow accounts? Trump's mouth opened, then snapped shut, then opened again. He tried to claw his way back. "That's not what I said," he barked. "Don't twist my words. You're trying to trap me. You're twisting everything like the dishonest hack you are." But the damage was done. Jasmine pressed harder, her voice rising like a drumbeat of justice. "America just heard you," she declared. "They heard you admit it. No twisting, no tricks, straight from your mouth. You've tied yourself to oligarch money, and no insult, no tantrum, no outburst will erase that." The chamber roared. Some gasped in disbelief. Others whispered in awe. A few even broke into scattered claps before being hushed again. But the shift was undeniable. For the first time, the weight of the room tilted, not toward Trump's bluster, but toward Jasmine's relentless precision. The aura of invincibility surrounding the 47th president had cracked, a fissure running deep and jagged. Trump sensed it. His fists trembled. His eyes darted, searching for escape, for control, for some way to claw back the dominance that had always come so easily. But Jasmine stood unshaken. "Your anger betrays you," she said quietly, almost gently. But the words cut deeper than any shout. "Every time you lash out, every time you spit insults, you peel away the mask you've worn for so long. And underneath, all America sees is fear." Trump slammed his hand again, but this time it sounded hollow. The chamber could feel it. The audience could sense it. The nation could see it. For the first time in years, Donald Trump looked cornered. And for the first time in this hearing, the people watching, millions across America, leaned toward Jasmine Crockett, their faith, their hope, their belief shifting to her side. The warrior had struck again, and the giant was beginning to stumble. Trump's face twisted, the practiced smirk of a showman giving way to the sneer of a cornered beast. And then, like a blade dipped in venom, he struck where it hurt most. "Everyone knows your family is nothing. Failures, nobodies. You think standing here erases your pathetic past?" The chamber gasped. Some mouths hung open. Others shook their heads in disbelief. It wasn't policy. It wasn't debate. It was a knife to the ribs of her dignity. For a fleeting second, Jasmine Crockett's cheeks burned red. Her breath caught in her chest and the silence between heartbeats felt endless. But shame never claimed her. Instead, it ignited her fury. She leaned forward, eyes blazing, voice sharp as thunder. "This is not a gossip circus, Mr. President. This is history, and history will not remember your cheap insults. It will remember your crimes." The words rang like steel against stone, cutting through the poison he had tried to spread. Trump slammed the desk with his palm, the boom echoing like a gunshot. "You're weak. You're nothing without this stage," he barked, his face flushed, jowls quivering with rage. But Jasmine didn't flinch. She raised her hand and pointed directly at him, her finger unwavering, as if she were aiming a spear. "You can attack my family. You can attack my past. But what you cannot erase is the truth. And the truth is standing right in front of you, exposing every lie you've ever told this nation." The crowd erupted, half cheering, half jeering, while cameras zoomed in on the locked eyes of predator and prey. The chairman pounded his gavel over and over. "Order! Order in the chamber!" But the storm only grew louder. Trump's insults poured like acid, each one uglier than the last. He barked about her upbringing, her neighborhood, even her appearance. The ugliness was raw, unfiltered, dripping with contempt. But Jasmine met every word with fire. "You think belittling me will save you?" she roared. "It won't. The people see you now, stripped of the mask, desperate, exposed." Every sentence she threw back hit like a stone hurled in battle, denting the armor of a man who had long relied on intimidation. The chamber had become a battlefield of words. No swords, no shields, only truth versus venom. One congressman leaned to another and whispered, "This isn't a hearing anymore. It's a war." And it was. The audience could barely keep up, heads darting back and forth as if watching heavyweights in the final round. Each insult, each counterstrike, landed with the weight of destiny. At one point, Trump leaned across the desk, snarling, "You'll regret this, Crockett. You'll regret ever stepping into this arena." But Jasmine didn't blink. She lifted her chin, her voice a steady boom. The only one who'll regret today is you. The silence that followed was deafening. Even Trump hesitated, caught off guard by the certainty in her tone. For the first time, it wasn't just her words, it was the way she said them. The conviction, the fire, the unbreakable spirit of a woman who refused to be silenced. The audience felt it. The cameras captured it. The nation watching from living rooms and phones felt the ground shift beneath their feet. The insults had backfired. The venom had turned into fuel. And Jasmine Crockett stood taller than ever, her voice thundering like a verdict. By the end of the exchange, it was no longer Trump towering over her. It was Jasmine who commanded the room. And as the gavel struck again, trying to force calm upon the chaos, the truth was clear. The fight had just reached a level no one thought possible, and it was far from over. Here at Harrison Stories, we capture these battles raw, unfiltered, and unforgettable. Subscribe now so you never miss the next clash that shakes the halls of power. The echoes of the gavel had barely faded when Jasmine struck again. She didn't raise her voice this time. She didn't need to. With a calm, deliberate motion, she reached beneath the stack of folders on her desk and pulled out a thin, sealed envelope marked classified. The room stilled. Every camera lens zoomed in. Every heartbeat seemed to falter. "Mr. President," Jasmine said, her voice steady as a razor's edge, "the people deserve to hear the truth. Not your version, not your spin. The truth." She slid the envelope open and drew out a small digital recorder. A ripple of murmurs swept through the chamber. Then with one click, the speakers filled with a voice the entire nation knew too well. It was Trump. His unmistakable tone, low and calculating, captured in cold clarity. On the tape, he was negotiating, his words slithering through the speakers, discussing terms with a shadowy figure tied to powerful oligarchs. Deals, money, favors, promises. Every syllable was a dagger. The chamber exploded. Gasps, shouts, the frantic rustle of papers. Reporters dashed to their phones, typing feverishly as breaking alerts lit up screens across the world. Trump's face drained of color. For a moment, he didn't look like the showman or the fighter. He looked cornered. Then the storm erupted from his throat. "Fake news, fake! This is doctored. It's a sham!" His voice cracked as he slammed his fist onto the table so hard the microphone shook. But the crack in his tone betrayed him. His hand trembled as it lingered on the wood. Jasmine didn't flinch. She rose from her chair, eyes locked on him like a hunter who had finally cornered her prey. "Your denial won't save you this time," she declared. "The world is hearing your voice, your deals, your betrayal. No spin, no filter, just the truth laid bare." The audience was on their feet, some shouting, some clapping, some simply frozen in disbelief. The chamber was chaos incarnate, a storm of history unraveling in real time. Trump shouted over it all, "You're lying! You're lying to the American people." But every word sounded weaker than the last. His chest heaved, his forehead glistened with sweat. For the first time in this battle, Donald Trump wasn't just angry. He was afraid, and the nation could see it. Cameras caught every twitch, every crack in his armor. The man who had built an empire on dominance now looked trapped, pressed against a wall of truth too heavy to bulldoze. Jasmine let the recording play until the final damning word echoed into silence. Then she pressed stop, and the hush that followed was louder than any scream. She leaned in, her voice low but carrying through every microphone, every broadcast, every living room across America. "This is not fake. This is not theater. This is your voice, Mr. President, selling out the very people you swore to serve." Trump's lips parted, but no words came. His hand tightened on the desk, knuckles white, jaw clenched like stone about to crack. The audience knew. The media knew. Even Trump's allies sitting behind him shifted in their seats, eyes darting nervously, sweat forming on brows. The king was bleeding, and Jasmine Crockett had struck the wound herself. As the gavel pounded in a desperate attempt to restore order, the cameras kept rolling, capturing the moment a president was cornered. Not by armies, not by weapons, but by the unshakable truth of his own voice. And across the nation, millions whispered the same thought at once. Trump had finally been driven to the wall. The chamber was still ringing with echoes of the recording. But now a different kind of silence took hold. Trump did not shout this time. He didn't pound the desk or fling another insult. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, arms folded across his chest, lips curled into a smirk meant to wound more than words ever could. His eyes locked onto Jasmine Crockett, cold, piercing, predatory. It was a look that said, "You're beneath me." A look he had used on rivals, on journalists, on anyone who dared to stand in his way. The silence pressed down like iron. Cameras zoomed in, catching every flicker of Trump's expression. His narrowed eyes, the twitch at the corner of his mouth, the calculated contempt dripping from his stare. The crowd shifted uneasily. The shouting had stopped, but the tension was worse. This was no longer a hearing. It was a duel fought without words. Jasmine did not look away. Her back straightened, her chin lifted, her hands folded calmly on the desk in front of her, as if carved from stone, and in that moment, silence became her shield. Where Trump's stare sought to belittle, Jasmine's stillness turned it back on him, reflecting his rage like a mirror he could not shatter. Seconds passed, long, unbearable seconds. The room could hear every shuffle of paper, every cough from the gallery, every creak of leather as someone adjusted nervously in their seat. But neither Trump nor Jasmine moved. It was as if the world itself had stopped, caught between two wills colliding in absolute silence. Trump's smirk deepened, but his eyes betrayed him. They darted for just a fraction of a second, toward the cameras, toward the crowd, before snapping back to her. He was measuring his audience. He was calculating. But Jasmine saw it. She caught that flicker of doubt, that tiny crack in the facade, and she smiled. Not a wide smile, not mocking, just the faintest curve of her lips, a signal that she saw through the performance and was not afraid. The chamber gasped as if they had witnessed a sword thrust, because sometimes a smile at the right moment is deadlier than 1,000 words. Trump shifted in his chair. For the first time, he looked uncomfortable in his own armor of silence. He leaned forward as if to lunge, but no words came. His throat tightened, his jaw flexed, but nothing broke through the weight of Jasmine's calm. It was a reversal no one expected, the master of intimidation undone by quiet resistance. The chairwoman's gavel cracked against the wood, a futile attempt to dissolve the tension. But the battle had already been decided in the eyes of the audience. Reporters scribbled frantically, noting not just the evidence, but the way Trump was unraveling, word by word, silence by silence. Viewers across the country leaned closer to their screens, holding their breath as the duel stretched on. This wasn't noise anymore. It was something far more terrifying. A war fought in the stillness between two unyielding souls. And in that stillness, Donald Trump was losing. By the time the chairwoman finally restored order and the hearing lurched forward, the verdict in the hearts of many was already written. Jasmine Crockett had proven she could meet Trump not just in the fire of words, but in the deadliest quiet of all. And when silence is louder than shouting, it leaves scars that never fade. But those scars did not stay confined to the hearing chamber. Outside, the world erupted. Within minutes, clips of the clash, Trump's fist slamming the desk, Jasmine's calm defiance, the tape that cracked open his denials, flooded social media. On Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, the hashtags roared into life. Trump vs. Jasmine, a war of words, justice on trial. In less than an hour, Trump vs. Jasmine wasn't just trending in Washington. It was the #1 topic across the globe. Millions watched the 30-second clip of Trump sneering, "You're disgusting trash." Millions more replayed Jasmine's unflinching stare, her whispered words cutting deeper than any scream. The internet burned like wildfire. Meme after meme appeared. Trump's reddened face plastered next to captions mocking his rage. Jasmine's steel gaze painted as the look of a warrior queen. Videos racked up tens of millions of views overnight. News anchors repeated the exchange as if it were scripture, dissecting each glare, each pause, each tremble in Trump's voice. But the storm wasn't just online. Across the country, dinner tables became battlegrounds. At bars, in coffee shops, in church parking lots, Americans argued with a venom that matched the hearing itself. Trump loyalists shouted that Jasmine was a fraud, a grandstanding opportunist, a political witch set on tearing down their leader. Crockett's supporters fired back, calling Trump a liar, a bully, a tyrant finally exposed in the harsh light of truth. In the streets, the divide turned physical. Rallies formed overnight, one side waving red banners, chanting Trump's name, the other carrying placards with Jasmine's face, the word justice blazing in bold across it. Chants clashed with counter-chants, curses flew like stones. In some towns, fists did too. Police were called to break up skirmishes. Videos surfaced of neighbors screaming at each other across fences, families splintering in arguments too bitter to mend. The hearing had spilled far beyond marble walls. It had torn its way into the fabric of the nation itself. In Washington, media trucks lined the streets, reporters broadcasting live with urgent voices. Tonight, America finds itself at war with itself. Editorials poured in from every corner, some damning Jasmine as reckless, others hailing her as the last line of defense against tyranny. Foreign leaders even weighed in. Some applauded her bravery, others mocked the chaos as proof of America's decline. The White House released a terse statement defending Trump, calling the evidence baseless. But their words were drowned beneath the roar of public opinion, a tidal wave too massive to spin away. Every poll showed the same fracture. Half the nation rallying tighter around Trump, the other half surging behind Jasmine. The middle ground shrank to nothing. And in the center of it all stood the two combatants. One, a sitting president with everything to lose. The other, a congresswoman turned warrior whose star had never burned brighter. The hearing was no longer just a hearing. It was a stage upon which the very soul of America was being fought over, word by word, glare by glare. And as night fell, with headlines screaming across every screen, one truth could not be denied. This was no longer politics. It was a civil war of voices, splitting a nation down the center. And everyone knew the next clash inside that chamber would not just decide reputations. It would decide the future. But Trump was never alone. In the shadows, his network stirred to life. Within hours of the hearing, the internet flooded with a new wave of content, slickly edited videos, distorted audio clips, images pulled from nowhere and everywhere. The storylines all pointed in one direction: Jasmine Crockett. One video claimed she had staged the entire confrontation, her words dubbed over with artificial sneers. Another showed a clipped segment where she appeared to stumble over her notes, looped endlessly with mocking captions. A third, more sinister, twisted her past speeches into what looked like radical declarations, painting her as dangerous, unhinged. They spread like poison. Bots amplified them, influencers repeated them, pundits presented them as fact. Soon half the country had seen at least one of these doctored clips. On television, talking heads thundered about Jasmine's true colors. On radio, callers fumed, their voices shaking with fury. "Did you see that video? She's a fraud," one cried. "She's out to destroy America," shouted another. The media landscape fractured into chaos. What had been a battle over truth turned into a blizzard of lies. And through it all, Trump smiled. He didn't need to shout. His army of allies, donors, and digital mercenaries shouted for him. They built a wall of noise so loud many couldn't tell fact from fiction anymore. Jasmine felt the weight of it pressing down. Everywhere she turned, screens blared insults. Reporters shoved microphones into her face with accusations. Her social media pages overflowed with threats, slurs, venom dressed up as commentary. They attacked her race. They attacked her gender. They even dragged her family into the mud. The storm was relentless. But Jasmine did not retreat. She held press conferences with poise, refusing to play defense. "I will not apologize for telling the truth," she said firmly. "America deserves honesty, not manipulation." Her voice carried strength, but behind the closed doors of her office, the toll was real. Her staff grew anxious. Some urged her to tone it down, to step back. But Jasmine shook her head. "They want me silent," she whispered, "and that's exactly why I won't be." Because Jasmine had something left, something she had not shown. While Trump's allies drowned the world in shadows, Jasmine had been gathering light. Deep in her files, buried under months of research and careful protection, lay her ace. A piece of evidence so damning, so undeniable that no edit or smear campaign could erase it. She kept it locked away, guarded like a weapon too dangerous to reveal too soon. Her aides begged her to use it now to counter the onslaught, but Jasmine knew better. Timing was everything. To strike too early would mean the evidence would be buried under more lies, but to strike at the perfect moment, that would be fatal. So she waited. She endured the storm, the insults, the doctored images, and poisoned headlines. She let the shadows believe they were winning, and in the silence of her resolve, she sharpened her blade. The world thought Jasmine Crockett was cornered, but in truth, she was waiting for the moment to unleash her final blow. A blow that could tear down not just Trump's defense, but the entire fortress of deceit surrounding him. And when that moment came, the shadows would have nowhere left to hide. The chamber was packed tighter than ever. Reporters leaned forward in their seats, pens trembling. Cameras zoomed in, red lights blinking like watchful eyes. Every breath inside that hall seemed to hang, waiting. Jasmine Crockett rose slowly. The weight of the storm still clung to her shoulders, but her gaze was clear, steady, unflinching. She carried a folder in her hands, thick, heavy, alive with consequence. Trump lounged back at first, lips curled in that familiar sneer. To him, she was already finished. He thought the fake videos had done their work, that her reputation was ash. He didn't know what was coming. Jasmine's voice cut the silence. For weeks, she began, the American people have been fed lies. Not opinions, not arguments. Lies. Her words rang sharp, slicing the still air. She opened the folder, spreading its contents across the table. Screenshots, emails, financial records, internal memos, stamped with the insignia of Trump's closest media allies. These documents prove, she continued, her tone unwavering, that Donald Trump and his associates paid millions to orchestrate a disinformation campaign, fabricated videos, doctored speeches, false narratives, all designed to smear the truth and poison public trust. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Some clapped hands to their mouths. Others shook their heads in disbelief. The air buzzed with whispered thunder. Trump shot upright. "That's a lie," he barked, face flushing crimson. "A total lie. Fake evidence, cooked up by crooks." But Jasmine didn't flinch. She slid another page forward, this one signed by one of Trump's own strategists. An email detailing payments to digital firms, instructions on how to splice her voice, how to seed the clips across social platforms. The signature was unmistakable. The room erupted. Senators leaned in, whispering furiously. Journalists scribbled like mad, their phones already buzzing as they rushed to blast the revelation to the world outside. Trump's voice cracked into a roar. "You think this proves anything? You're pathetic. A disgrace. You." But the more he shouted, the worse it became. His words came ragged, angry, desperate. His finger jabbed the air, his face twisted with fury. Every insult, every curse only made him look less like a leader and more like a cornered man lashing out. And the chamber saw it. They felt it. For the first time, Donald Trump looked weak. His power, once towering and untouchable, seemed to shrink with every syllable. The armor of bravado cracked under the weight of his own rage. Where he had once dominated rooms with sheer force of will, now he looked small, flailing, undone. Jasmine stood calm. Not triumphant, not smug, calm. Her silence after each of his outbursts cut deeper than any retort could have. The contrast was devastating. Cameras drank in every second. Jasmine poised like steel, and Trump, unraveling before the nation's eyes. The whispers swelled into a tidal wave. "She has proof. He's finished. Oh my God, it's all true." Even some of Trump's staunchest defenders shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting, their confidence shaken. The spell was breaking. Trump slammed a fist on the table, shouting until his voice rasped. But every word only tightened the noose. The evidence sat there, irrefutable, undeniable, staring back at him. Jasmine finally spoke again, her voice soft but carrying like a hammer strike. "Mr. Trump, America deserves better than shadows and lies. And today the shadows have been exposed." The chamber fell silent again. Not empty silence, charged silence, alive with realization. For the first time, the battlefield had shifted. The woman they tried to bury under a mountain of deceit now stood taller than ever. And the man who had built his empire on bluster and intimidation finally looked like what he feared most, a loser. The tide had turned. The knockout blow had landed, and nothing would ever be the same again. But Trump was not the kind of man to die quietly. He lurched forward, veins pulsing in his neck, voice already cracking from fury. "This is a witch hunt," he bellowed, his words shaking the air. "Lies, all of it. You're nothing, Jasmine. Nothing. A nobody trying to take down the greatest president this country has ever seen." The chamber jolted, but before his echo could fade, Jasmine fired back. Her tone was sharp, precise, like a scalpel cutting through flesh. "You call yourself great, Mr. Trump? Great men don't pay millions to manufacture lies. Great men don't tremble when confronted with truth. You are not great. You are terrified." Her words struck like a thunderclap. Trump's face contorted. He slammed his palm on the table, the sound cracking through the chamber. "Terrified? I built empires. I faced the crooked media. I ran this country better than anyone. Better than you ever could." Jasmine didn't blink. She leaned forward, eyes locked onto his, and delivered her counter like a blade straight to the heart. "You didn't build empires, Mr. Trump. You built illusions. You didn't run this country, you ran it into chaos. And when the truth came knocking, you hid behind lies. That is not strength. That is cowardice." The chamber gasped. Some clutched the edge of their seats. Every line was a strike, every retort a blade, and no one dared to look away. Trump tried to laugh, but the sound came out hollow, brittle. He jabbed his finger across the room. "You think you're some hero? You're a fraud, a loudmouth. You've done nothing for this country except embarrass it. People hate you. They laugh at you." Jasmine's reply came like fire meeting gasoline. "People don't laugh at me, Mr. Trump. They fear what I reveal about you. Every scream, every insult you throw proves one thing. You're exposed, cornered, and bleeding in front of the world." The words tore through the chamber like shrapnel. Trump's roar grew ragged, desperation leaking into the cracks. "You're disgusting trash. You're a liar. You're beneath me." But Jasmine's voice sliced through, steady as steel. "If telling the truth makes me disgusting in your eyes, then I will wear that as a crown. Because the only thing beneath you, Mr. Trump, is the floor you're about to crash onto." And the audience erupted. Half gas, half muffled applause. It was no longer just a hearing. It was war, fought with words so sharp they cut reputations to ribbons. Trump's arms flailed now, his voice climbing into a roar that bordered on a scream. "You won't win this. I have millions, millions who follow me, who will never believe you." Jasmine stood tall, her reply calm yet devastating. "Then let them watch, Mr. Trump. Let them watch you unravel with every word. Because history doesn't remember the loudest. It remembers the ones who stood firm when the liars screamed the hardest." The silence that followed was suffocating. Even Trump, for a brief second, faltered, his mouth open, but no words forming. Then he snarled, almost animalistic. "You're finished. I'll destroy you." But Jasmine only tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "You already destroyed yourself. I'm just holding up the mirror." The chamber quaked with murmurs. Some senators shifted uncomfortably, others scribbled furiously, but all eyes stayed locked on the battlefield between the two. Word by word, strike by strike, the duel stretched on. Trump spitting venom, Jasmine countering with ice-cold precision. Every sentence a clash of steel, every breath a fight for dominance. The atmosphere grew so tight it was hard to breathe. Even the cameras seemed to tremble as they zoomed in, capturing every beat of sweat, every flicker of rage, every flash of determination. And then it happened. Trump lunged forward in one last desperate roar. "You're nothing without me. I made this arena. I made this fight. Without me, you don't even exist." Jasmine leaned forward, her voice dropping into a quiet, lethal whisper that cut deeper than any scream. "Without you, Mr. Trump, America heals." The chamber erupted in a frenzy of gas, shouts, and disbelief. The duel was over. The final blade had struck, and the silence that followed was not emptiness. It was the sound of a kingdom cracking. The chamber sat frozen, like time itself had stopped. Then slowly the gavel struck. Once, twice. The echo rolled like thunder through the hall. "All parties will come to order," the chair declared, his voice trembling with the weight of history. "The evidence presented here today carries significant weight." A wave rippled across the room. Every word was a hammer blow, every syllable pressed deeper into Trump's chest like iron chains tightening. Trump leaned back in his seat, jaw locked, his face carved from stone. Yet beneath the mask, the cracks were visible, eyes darting, lips twitching, breath uneven. He forced a smirk, a hollow performance for the cameras. But the illusion was shattered. For the first time in his long, defiant career, Donald J. Trump looked small. The chair continued, voice steady now, each phrase striking with measured precision. "The documents, the recordings, the testimony, together they form a body of evidence that cannot be ignored. What has been revealed here will not vanish. It will shape what comes next, for this council, for this nation." Gasps and murmurs swept through the chamber. This was not a whisper anymore. It was a declaration. Jasmine Crockett sat tall, her eyes unflinching, her shoulders squared. She had not moved through fire and fury for applause, but in that instant she knew the truth had found its voice. And then, like a wave breaking against a cliff, the chamber erupted into applause. Not polite clapping, not cautious approval. Thunder, roaring, relentless thunder. Men and women rose to their feet, some with tears, others with clenched fists, but all united in the sound of victory. Jasmine's name was not spoken aloud, but it was carved into every beat of those hands, every breath of that roar. She did not smile, not yet. Instead, she closed her eyes for the briefest moment, as if to remember the battlefield she had just survived. The insults, the venom, the shadows, and the moment she stood firm against the storm. When she opened them again, she looked across the chamber and straight into Trump's eyes. He sat rigid, face dark as midnight, but his smirk wavered. He tried to sit taller, to project defiance, to look unbroken, but no performance could drown out the truth. He was cornered. He was finished. The chair's gavel struck once more, sealing the moment in history. This council recognizes the gravity of today's revelations. Further proceedings will follow. But let it be clear, the allegations against the president now stand upon evidence too substantial to dismiss. A hush fell again, thicker than before. The words hung in the air, heavy as iron chains. Trump's fingers gripped the edge of the table, knuckles pale. He muttered under his breath, a hiss only the microphones caught. "This isn't over, not by a long shot." But even he knew the line rang hollow. The walls had shifted, the tide had turned, and the weight of justice pressed down on his shoulders like a mountain. Jasmine didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder than any retort. The crowd's applause swelled again, rolling like a storm breaking free from chains. Journalists scribbled furiously. Cameras flashed. Outside the chamber, the world waited to feast on every headline, every frame, every soundbite. History had been written, and it was written in Jasmine Crockett's voice. Trump sat in the ruins of his own fury, cloaked in shadows of arrogance that no longer concealed his weakness. The mask was gone. Above him, like a sword suspended by a single thread, hung the specter of a political verdict that could tear him from power. Not today, not this hour, but soon, and he knew it. The chamber began to empty, the echoes of applause still bouncing off the marble walls, but the weight remained, pressing into the very bones of the nation. Jasmine lingered for a moment longer, her eyes scanning the room that had witnessed the battle of a lifetime. Then, with steady steps, she rose. It was not triumph she carried in her stride. It was something heavier, deeper, more unshakable. The burden of victory and the knowledge that the fight beyond these walls had only just begun. And as the cameras zoomed in on Trump's face, ashen, furious, and defeated, the world saw not just a man losing his grip. They saw the fall of an empire, slow and inevitable. The verdict had not been final, but destiny had already chosen its path. When the gavel's echo finally died, the chamber erupted, not with cheers this time, but with chaos. Reporters scrambled, cameras flashing like lightning in a storm. Security rushed forward, forming a wall around Donald Trump as he rose from his chair, face a mask of fury and humiliation. He moved stiffly, each step like dragging chains. The once mighty figure, the man who had built his image as untouchable, invincible, unbreakable, now looked cornered, battered, and strangely human. The crowd jeered and shouted as he made his way toward the exit. Fraud! Coward! The words cut through the air like stones. For years, Trump had thrived on being the disruptor, the unshakable storm. Now he was the one being shaken. The cameras captured it all, his clenched jaw, his trembling fist, the moment he slammed the door behind him as if to shut out the world. But no door could close against what had already been unleashed. The myth of invulnerability had collapsed. The image of the untouchable emperor had crumbled before millions of eyes. And as Trump vanished into the corridors, Jasmine Crockett remained seated, calm, steady. Her presence filled the chamber, not with noise, but with a gravity that drew every gaze toward her. She had not just survived, she had conquered. For the first time, commentators dared to speak it aloud. She stood against the machine and didn't flinch. She faced the darkness head-on, and the darkness blinked. In the hours that followed, headlines blazed across the globe. Jasmine Crockett, the woman who shook a president, the fall of the untouchable, when truth roared louder than power. On the streets, people carried her name like a banner. In churches, in schools, in crowded bars, her defiance was replayed on screens, her words quoted like scripture. Memes flooded the internet, not mocking her, but lifting her up. Justice had found a face. She became more than a congresswoman, more than a voice in the chamber. Jasmine Crockett became a symbol. To some, she was the warrior of justice, the woman who had dared to stand where no one else would. To others, she was the one who finally showed that power, no matter how vast, could be challenged, cracked, and forced to kneel. But while the world praised her, Jasmine knew the shadows had not been vanquished. Trump's empire of influence still lingered, in boardrooms, in back channels, in whispers and smoke-filled rooms where men with money and power plotted their next move. He was wounded, but he was not gone. And that truth sat heavy in her chest as she stepped out of the chamber into the blinding flash of the press. Questions flew like arrows. What comes next? Will Trump face trial? Do you fear retaliation? Jasmine didn't flinch. Her answer was simple, sharp, and carried across the noise like a blade. This isn't about fear, this is about justice, and justice does not retreat. The words became an instant headline, a rallying cry that echoed from city streets to international newsrooms. Yet in the quiet corners of power, behind locked doors, the reaction was different. Anger, panic, desperation. The dark networks Trump had relied on were already regrouping, crafting new narratives, preparing new weapons of disinformation. The battle in the chamber had ended, but the war was far from over. For every cheer outside, there was a whisper inside. For every headline praising Jasmine, there was a meeting plotting her downfall. And as night fell, the world seemed split between triumph and tension. One side saw the dawn of justice. The other, the desperation of a cornered beast. Trump's shadow loomed, not as strong as before, but still stretching across the nation. And Jasmine's figure rose, a beacon against that shadow, but a beacon that knew storms were still to come. Because this was not an ending. It was a beginning. The chamber was empty now, echoes fading into silence. But the shockwaves rolled outward, through the country, through the world, shaking foundations no one thought could ever crack. The fight had rewritten history, and its legacy was only just beginning to unfold. In every age, power tests the courage of those who dare to confront it. Jasmine Crockett's defiance reminds us that justice is not the absence of fear, but the will to stand firm in spite of it. The lesson is timeless. No voice is too small to challenge the roar of oppression, and no truth is too fragile to pierce the armor of lies. May we carry this battle within us, not as spectators of history, but as guardians of what is right in our homes, our communities, and our world. If this battle shook you, don't just move on. Remember it. Talk about it. Pass it to someone who still believes justice can rise louder than power. Subscribe to Harrison Stories, where truth is never silenced and every clash reveals the cost of courage. Hit the bell, because the fight isn't over. The next chapter will be darker, sharper, and closer to the world you know. This story is a dramatization, born from the echoes of real struggles and real bravery. Any likeness is not accident, but reflection, for us to question, to challenge, and to grow. Thank you for watching. Justice isn't inherited, it's fought for. This is Harrison Stories.